I also have some chat GPT advice. So it's very fun to use. You can ask it all sorts of questions and it will give you long form answers. I do a little podcast called Psychiatry, and I did an episode recently where I just asked it a bunch of questions. Some of them very specific, and some of them more kind of for fun, like who's better, Freud or Jung, and just to see what it says, right? Because it's an artificial intelligence, and also to test to see if the things that it says are consistent if you ask the same question different ways. So there is definitely inconsistency in its responses, but it's generally a pretty good tool for like a basic internet search. You have to verify everything though. And you need to be aware of the fact that everything, all the data that it was trained on was up to 2001. So it's missing a whole year, I think, and a half at this point of humanity.
2021.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, 2020. Thank you. 2021, so yeah, it's missing like a whole year of humanity. There's a lot of updates. Some of the information you get is going to be very outdated. Plus, it was trained on internet resources. So you have to be aware that you're not sure what the quality of the resource is. So it's a cool internet search tool, basically, but it's not an authority on anything.
It will not give you the next lottery numbers, though. I tried.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Navy Adsep, and this is a system for conditions not amounting to disability. That's kind of what they call it in the Navy. All of the principles that we're just talking about with Dr. Rustin apply as far as like when you decide to mentor somebody and all of that. So we're not going to review all of that. We're just going to basically assume you've made the decision somehow that this person needs an Adsep. So that's kind of where the background on this. I don't even make money off the podcast, so there's no financial interest there. And yeah, these opinions also change a lot. So even if I did accidentally reflect their opinion, I can't tell you that like 6 months from now that this is going to apply if you're watching this video. So make sure you double check everything here. So what we want to do here is know what the Navy thinks are psychiatric conditions that are appropriate for administrative separations. It's a little bit different than the Army, but mostly the same. What are the procedures required to do this? And we use Live Smart instead of that. BR, the Army has. And then, these are some of the major things. I really recommend like this UMed instruction 19.2a. It's also one of those things that chat GPT would not be able to tell you about because it didn't exist before September 2022. But it replaced this one. And it changes a little bit of the things. One of the notable things that I didn't have on the slide that I think is that in this one they talk about gender dysphoria as an admin separable condition, but not in this. So there's some differences. And then we've already kind of done this already, so I'm not really going to repeat that. So if you're watching this video and you want that, get the first half of the Army video later, and that's going to give you this information. So the participant will also be able to describe differences in the decision making in this timeline, especially for adjustment disorder. We talked about that a little bit, but there are definitely Navy considerations too. All right, so we've got a 29-year-old U.S. Navy. This should say E3, sorry. I didn't catch that. You can't add in separate economics. Like this. So E3, admitted suicide West for suicidal ideation. Oh, I want to give some great kudos to Tom and Jess who put this stuff together kind of at the last minute. And Dr. Reed also sent me slides from Dr. Champion from a couple years ago. So this is a mishmash of those slides. So kudos to everybody who did that. So I did miss some things, and we'll have to clarify. So he's in a car accident, and no major trauma or injuries except for this mild TBI. Okay. Now he's having all these symptoms here. He's looking a lot like he has some PTSD from this car crash. He's admitted to 7 West for 2 weeks. Then he goes to his IOP. Then he follows up an outpatient. And so he's got all these trials of treatment. He's struggling to get work done, and he's not being able to get work sometimes because he's afraid of transportation. So what do you do? That's kind of the question on the Bedboard versus Adsep. But from what we learned before, as a review, anybody have like an idea right off the top of their head? Okay. For what?
Until we can rule out PTSD related to something that happened while serving.
It happened while serving. Was it related to the service?
Service related PTSD.
Even though he was on a family trip?
Was he on leave that he got approved?
So it's not always clear, right? But you would definitely want to document they have PTSD, there's a screening for it, and that it was not service related. And then a lot of times the people above us are the ones who make the decisions. You submit this, it goes to a medical board and we will review and decide, you know, like, is this service connected? But, you know, in this case, I'm not sure. Is it service connected or not? You know, Dr. If it's on leave, and then that's.
No, and not our decision.
Yeah.
So just push it through and the black box sorts it out.
And this helps us to know like how we get things into that black box. So this is US Navy, the other one's in US Army. It looks almost identical except when we talk about sailors instead of soldiers, and there's a little bit of difference in what are some of the regulations that you need to be looking at in order to get some information. So here, always adjustment disorder, personality disorders, of course, a lot of other things, very similar to the Army, but there are some differences in the process we'll talk about. So somebody comes to you and they have a behavioral health condition, and you have to determine, is it significantly contributing factor to whatever is problem that they got symptoms for. If it's not, then you don't even need to worry about behavioral health Adsep. They can just, the command can take control. A lot of times the command will send them to you expecting there to be a behavioral health thing, and they might have not done the paperwork, so too bad for them. They have to deal with this person longer. But that's who gets it if it's not. We don't worry about that. So is there a behavioral health condition eligible for Adsep? And if you don't know, we'll check it out then. But if it's not there, then you're not going to accept them, right? You can give them back to command. You can make some recommendations for what they need to do, but the commanders need this or other separation options if they want to separate this person. And then when we really get more into the nitty-gritty of things, it's down here. It is eligible for Adsep. Now we have a lot of work to do. So that's just a slide there, a little bit bigger. So here we go, another vignette. 23-year-old male, US Navy E4, no past psychiatric history or past medical history, came to your clinic after an 8-day admission to 7 West. He was admitted due to suicidal ideation. He was being put on a fitness enhancing program, which is so for failing PT probably. And the patient said it was really an embarrassment. He didn't think he's going to be able to do it. He's got a busy life, kids at home. His wife's also in the military. Like I can't keep up. This is not for me. I'm ready to give up. I wanted to die. I didn't do it because, well, my wife and kids. But on 7 West, it seemed to improve. Now started on any medication discharge for outpatient follow-up. On 7 West, someone could have made a decision to Adsep already, but this patient wasn't done. So now he's going to follow up, needs a course of treatment. And so where are we at here? The condition is eligible for Adsep if we have like an acute adjustment disorder, and how bad is this going to interfere with the military stuff. But we don't have enough really information, I think, at this point to say we've adequately treated them and done things. So we have more to do. On follow-up, you decide the patient it's a good prognosis, seems to have been improved, mild symptoms. You do some CBT, and he decides, well, yeah, I can do this. You know, he reframes the whole thing. He's actually now like appreciates the fact that someone kicked him in the butt and got him back into life. Now he can pass his physical readiness test. So what do we do in this case? With the Z code. Why would we do that?
So it sounds like he's no longer having that adjustment phase, the psychosocial functioning. It seems like he's doing his PRT now. So if there's another adjustment phase, whatever time frame you find within 12 months, you have an option to do the CMD.
Yeah, so it's for two reasons. One is because the condition is resolved, right, from a clinical perspective. The other is because we've had questions about, okay, what if someone has chronic adjustment disorder, and what constitutes chronic adjustment disorder versus multiple acute adjustment disorders right after each other? And if you don't document an adjustment disorder is resolved, then you can allow the people who have to review your admin set later to say, this looks like chronic to me. No one ever said they were better, right? So you're saying in your note, hey, they are better. They no longer have the adjustment disorder. And it's important for the timeline to make sure that you've documented it for that 72 hours in the Navy, right? That they're no longer having adjustment disorder. Now, this particular incident cannot be chronic. So, So you've decided that they don't have a poor prognosis, so it's not appropriate to Adsep them, and they can be kind of followed up and returned to full duty, depending on, they had an inpatient admission, so they have to follow all those regs. But as far as the Adsep process, we're kind of done with that at the moment. But let's say all of a sudden this person is not improving, they've had that 8 weeks of CBT, but they're more severe. They're telling you you're actually a bad doctor, and they don't like you anymore. He's missed several of those fitness enhancing sessions, and claims it's because of stuff he has to do at home. His command is like a toxic command because they actually say you need to show up to work. He feels worse, and although he's not really currently suicidal, he's like, but suicide's probably the only way out if I can't get out of the military. So what do we do here? This is a continuum. This is not you got better and then got worse. This is he continues to get worse. Although they might be almost the same in the end. So now we're down here. They've been given ample opportunity to overcome their symptoms. You could think, well, I want to give them more opportunity. I'm going to send them to IOP or something like. You could make that, you have some wiggle room about what is ample opportunity. If you don't say he's had ample opportunity, then basically he hasn't, because you were the doctor. But easily, like, okay, this person's just getting worse despite what is evidence-based treatment, and we're going to proceed with the admin step. So, wow, now we're there, and the scary part happens. You have to open limb. So, but wait, we're not there yet. So you have to do a lot of other things before you just decide to open up Limbu and put in the Adsep. All right. It might be the thing that you just jump to and you want to click that box, but before you do that, you really have to communicate a lot. So demand has to be communicated with, the patient has to be communicated with, and so that nobody is surprised by what's happening when it's happening. So commanders don't really know what the severity of the prognosis is necessarily. They might have put the patient into a position where they're actually performing at work, it's a different patient than this one, because they're in low stress now, and they're okay. So they don't necessarily know. But you might be able to say, like, this has the potential to impact the mission, health, or safety of the whole unit and advise the commander of that. So they might be clueless. They can't initiate the Adsep. You're the one who basically gives the recommendation to do that. Without your recommendation, their hands are tied. So treating the treating providers are expected to really be proactive in talking to the command. Even if the commander has not requested that information from you, you need to be like, this is command needs to know right now. Also, you have, especially at our level, it should really be more of a collaborative process. If we decide to accept someone, ask for help, talk about the case with your supervisors, and any other medical authorities you know, and be sure that the service member is not surprised by the fact that you're having behavioral health administrative separation. You might say, you know, you're not improving, I don't think we're helping you, and you forget to have a discussion with them that says, hey, you are going to be recommended for administrative separation for your behavioral health issues. For some people, this will be a great relief. It'll be like, finally, someone is getting me out of the mud, right? You know, for other people, this might cause them a lot of distress. So, but it's a conversation that needs to happen with the patient before you go and, you know, they may be already on a LIMDU, but before you do for the Adsep part of the LIMDU Smart, and you talk to their command, you talk to the patient. And I recommend you talking to your supervisors, other people. So what happens if the commander is like, no, I don't agree, all right? So it's not just between you and the command at that point. You can go to, like a readiness champion or the equivalent, you inform somebody who has the knowledge in your department to say whether or not this constitutes a true readiness issue for the Navy. And if they get behind you and say, yes, this person needs an Adsep, then you don't have to keep treating that person. If you think they're not going to get better with treatment and they need an Adsep, you can discontinue direct treatment, especially if you think it's maybe harming them or it's just not clinically indicated. And in certain cases, that's probably a rare. I mean, we tend to do everything we can and then more, but you can stop if you think it's counterproductive. So, if you think mission failure is imminent because of this person, you go ahead and do the LIMDU process that we'll talk about in a minute. You don't stop. Then the commander and the superior commander are required the documentation. They get the documentation back, and it's an official. It's not a phone call. This is going to happen. This is official. Like, this is going to be happening. And if you want to stop it, you can do what you want to stop it. But the recommendation is official. It's on paper. And so the commander, when something's on paper, the commander has a higher level of sort of decision-making responsibility there. But you have put it on paper so that you have shown, I thought there was imminent mission failure or safety issues, and the commander rejected it. No, it wasn't me, it was them. From a medical legal point of view. So now you're ready to actually put something in here. There's a little box here. I find it almost impossible to intuitively navigate military websites. So I would never find that you need to go here and choose C and D instead of NEB. Right? I would not even think about that. So that's a little box you go to. And you make sure you're in the C and D module, which is the condition not related, not amounting to disability. So here, they must go through LIMDU. It's the C and D module. And so you're here, and I'm just gonna double that up. And then make sure that you've done a complete thorough records review, all right? If you do a command record evaluation or you're seeing somebody for a while, and you think you know their history, but you haven't quite dug all as deep as they weren't super severe when they got to you and they sort of developed, make sure you go back and do a complete records review, because you're gonna have to report that you have done this and that they don't have a lot of other conditions. So we've already talked about this in the Army thing. Because they may end up with going through the IDA system, instead. And then you also will need necessary demographic, service-related information, like things like this person's deployments. They can tell you stuff, but sometimes people say they deployed and they were just underway. So you need actual, like, real, information. As far as like what this person really did in the military potentially, and just a regular demographic information, what the command's tracking. Okay, so you have to complete a brief clinical summary. So this is not like just the 3822. I think the 3822 is a nice brief clinical summary on a piece of paper, but in the Navy, as I understand it, and stop me if I'm wrong, Navy folks, it has to be kind of written out like paragraph form. Is that right? Taylor? No?
Not this long, but.
Okay, it's brief, okay. 3 or 4 sentences? Okay, great. So brief, it actually is brief, it's not a brief, it is brief. Okay. And then this brief clinical summary needs to go in the EMR. So you put it in the EMR if it's Alta, or I don't know how it's gonna work. With Genesis, has anyone had to do it in Genesis?
You can put econs in there.
In Genesis as well? Okay, so just place a Tcon, pop it in there, that puts the documentation. Just label it as the clinical summary. And then there's a memorandum version of it, and this you put into LimDoSmart. And so you go through, LimDoSmart will ask you in a step-by-step process, put this stuff in, you'll drop it in. And it's supposed to be patient privacy friendly because it's going to be read by the commander. So the one in the medical record can have maybe more information or specific, prognostic or historical information that you think, is okay to share in the medical record, but not like to the commander. When you put it in LibNew, the summary, it needs to be commander safe. And this relates to, I think, to what they talked about in the Army regarding like military sexual trauma and reports of restricted versus non-restricted. So if you're going to say in a summary that you think that military sexual trauma that was in a restricted report was something that contributed to this, that can go in Alta, but that shouldn't be necessarily right here. But you may not be doing this if you think that, right? You'll be saying, no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't be for Adsep by that point. So you upload the written statement regarding whether the member has these same kind of things that we're looking at in the Army, so PTSD or TBI. There are other conditions we'll talk about too, but there needs to be a statement that addresses both of these conditions. And then there's a CME recommendation letter template in LimDoSmart, and you have to figure out which one to use. Nothing, I couldn't find anything on this, but there is a template you need to upload. I think, is that right, Taylor? Have you? Okay, so it may just be the brief clinical summary is enough.
Yeah.
So then you tell your computing authority that you're doing this. You can pop it in there, and they're supposed to be notified. So if you put it in the LimDoSmart, computing authority should get like a notice. Okay, this is here. But they have, I think, like 5 days or something to respond to this and make something happen. So as soon as you do it, send them an email, say, hey, I did this, because they will like you more. and it's about like effective communication. So this doesn't get like somehow stuck in a limbo. People are expecting it to happen as well. So it must be, the computing authority must say, okay, right? If they have a chance to say, wait, no, or kick it back to you real quick and say, hey, I want you to restate this in a way that I can approve it. So they might give you advice on what you need to do to get it through the process. So they're like the first step of a filter to make sure that what's happening is okay, to move forward. And then this LimDoSmart team will provide separation recommendation to the members command. You have already made this recommendation to the command by calling them. You told them this is going to happen, but they're going to do some paperwork. And then there are some things that a flag medical department officer has to review. And in those, in like 1900.2a, it says who that person is for the Marine Corps versus the Navy. But that's not something you'll have to deal with. So this is interesting. If there is a personality disorder, it needs to be a flag officer who needs to approve it. And this has to do similarly with what Dr. Mead was talking about the Army. Well, a lot of people were being kicked out of the Army real quick, and they're like, well, you know, they weren't being truly evaluated, and PTSD had given adequate treatment, and then coming back. It used to be that, I guess, what I read from, I went to some lawyer websites who represent people who are being active, and I'm not sure what they say is true, but they say that like personality disorder used to be something like an unspecified personality disorder or any personality disorder. You could just quickly remove someone from the military with that diagnosis, just like adjustment disorder. So they could give someone a personality disorder diagnosis because they're not fitting in the Navy, and this was supposedly a common thing. And so the Navy responded to that by saying, well, now if you give that diagnosis, we have to have a flag officer review that to make sure that this is not just us kicking people out easily when we haven't really done our due diligence. If they've had greater than 4 years of service, a flag officer in the Navy has to look at it, and then in the Army, too, some of these, you know, deployed or is currently deployed, or ever completed a flag or were flagged to complete a post-deployment health assessment. So this is one way for them to capture people who have been deployed where maybe other records didn't show or something. So if someone was flagged for a PDHA, then they have to be, this has to be reviewed by a flag officer before.
So one quick comment, if you go back, so sometimes, you know, you understand the intent behind it, but especially if the patient wants to get out, and you know that this person needs to get out, or they're gonna hurt themselves or something else. There's some other options too, right? So for chaperable, for Adsep conditions, include things like impulse control disorders, etc. Right? So you might diagnose someone with personality disorder, or you might want to, but you might say, well, let me just go with impulse control disorder because then I don't have to worry about the SLAC review, right? And so, but do those things if the patient is on board. If there's some possibility of, you know, some sort of legal issues down the road, etc., then just, you know, you can stick to and do things by the book, and that may complicate things for patients, but if they are fighting it and just want to give them all the benefits that have been laid out by policies and procedures by the Navy or by the Army or Air Force, for that matter.
And some of the things that some of the lawyers were complaining too, that now we have adjustment disorder and it's become a personality disorder. And so if they keep pushing things where it's like, it could end up being like, you could have adjustment disorder. But that would be a future thing if people feel like abusing that privilege.
Well, we used to have chronic adjustment disorder also, Adsep condition.
Yeah, so
People were using that, and you know, one of our faculty, I won't say who, they're really proud of this, but because it's being recorded, ended up in New York Times because some soldier complained about being, you know, kicked out of the Army for personality disorder. So this was a real thing, and it got really politicized.
so that's why flag officers have to be like checking your work. And of course the lawyers. So it goes to the command, and after it goes to the command in the Navy, it's basically out of your hands. You've done all your work up to this point. You really have to do. JAG is going to kind of process it from here, and they're going to have a board. One of the things that I was finding out last night while looking around is that Navy boards are a little bit easier than Army boards as far as like they're more, they'll just move on, you know. It's easier for them to decide to remove someone from service than in the Army. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but they tend to not demand as much. Once the basic work is done, the Army might debate it for a while and make it a hard decision. But the Navy is like, nah, see ya. Chronic adjustment disorder. All right. So, I don't want to leave you hanging, but it's like 6 months, okay, in the Navy. If you have that patient who gets better, document it so that when they come back in 3 months and they have another adjustment disorder, you can say this is not a chronic adjustment disorder. Otherwise, you're like hamstringing yourself. Very good documentation. You would think adjustment disorder is just like, oh, it's the default thing that I give to people and it's not a big deal. But it's actually a big deal, like legally, to have the timeline very clear. So the symptoms occurring in the ongoing presence of the identified stressor and continuously present for 6 months, and like the start date is important and the end date is important. So in my notes I try to put dates on everything, like exact date of when something happened, because that can act as a date for legal purposes. And also for you later, when someone's reading your note and they're like, when did all this, I don't get the timeline, you have some dates in there for them. So they're eligible with chronic adjustment disorder for more of a med-board, right? Disability, the IDA system. And they can't be recommended for condition not amounting to disability administrative separation. Whew, this is a lot of things, but I think it's kind of a cool thing to have up here, and it's a resource that will be provided. So adjustment disorder decision tree, right? You got your differential diagnosis, start date. Yeah. It's not like, I forgot to put that in the last 20 notes. I gotta start doing that now. Length of the symptoms, and then like the disposition. So all that's super important information for adjustment disorder diagnosis. The documentation pearls are here. I'm not going to read all those for you, but each of these steps is knocked out here in more detail. So this is if you're having any questions about like how you document adjustment disorder, especially if you're like, well, I think this person's not on for the military. Make sure you kind of review this or have a good idea as to what to do to make sure that all your documentation supports your recommendation in it. So, 20-year-old recruit seen by mental health provider for 3 weeks, depressed mood, insomnia, tearfulness. His appetite's not been good. He's like regretting joining the military. It's not suicidal, not homicidal. His instructors have not noticed anything in particular. Like he's only been in for a very short period of time. He's a recruit, so. They were aware that he's shown up late for work several times and has struggled to pass his uniform inspections. So we have an obvious kind of adjustment disorder right here, assuming we have kind of ruled other things out. Okay, what about 27-year-old, 4 years, 6 months time of service. So he's here for the very first time, but he's reporting 1 year depressed mood, anxiety, and intermittent suicidal ideation, but it was immediately after he came to his first command. He's been underway several times, and his new spouse is like, I'm not living with this anymore. So this is very stressful for him. He really hates the Navy. He wants to get out. It's like long hours. His command doesn't care about him. They just want him to do his job. And he's going to go underway soon. Right? He worries he will become suicidal if he must go. And then he says the symptoms have basically been continuously present over this past year. What do we have here? Anybody want to debate what the start date is, or how we would establish the start date, or what he has?
So I think there are multiple things that you could argue, you could say that his symptoms started when he says his symptoms started, or you could say his symptoms have started once he presents to behavioral health, because like that's when the dysfunction could have occurred. But it reads as a like major depressive disorder or a chronic adjustment disorder. Good fit.
Anyone else? So I can't read the slides, I mean, my notes for these little words.
Maybe a couple of thoughts.
Yes.
So I always think of like like thing that you mentioned, like if a flag officer has to review it. So he's been in for more than 4 years. He's been underway several times. He's been in the Navy for a while. So adjustment to the Navy is not really a thing. He's probably either ETS in 18 months or he re-signed, one of the two. So, you know, yeah, I'm not going to be this person like, you know, C&D right now, but I'd probably start on a limb to get some care and then kind of go from there. You could say adjustment to its new command, but it's not adjustment to the Navy C&D in my opinion.
One question I would want to ask is, it says new spouse. How long has he been married? Is that kind of related to the time frame of the relationship? Is the marriage like the thing you adjust?
See, he was like with her for a while, but they just got married. He's been with her like 2 years, but they're married for 6 months.
One thing I would add is, just so you can sleep at night, is, you know, I mean, could he have major depression or underlying medical work, right? So I usually ask, you know, if you had a magic wand and you could eliminate this PCS move altogether, do you think you would feel the way you're feeling now, right? So in other words, I'm trying to see if this is just a reaction, ongoing reaction to something, or he started out, but he has developed learned helplessness, learned hopelessness, and it doesn't really matter now, you know, that he's in this situation. Because we have life story explanation, right? That's why we have therapies like personal psychotherapy for depression or CBT, etc. So that would be something I would want to think about, especially in the Navy with 4 years plus time in service. If we were going to do C&D, we would have to go through a higher level of approval.
Yeah, the thing is you need collateral for this in order to establish a start date for sure. Because if someone comes to you, according to what I've read, and they say that stuff's been going on for a while, you know, if this is their first presentation to site, and there is no collateral proving that it has been longer, then that's the start date, the day of presentation. But if you have collateral, if you called someone else and they can affirm what's been going on, then you have a new start date. So for adjustment disorder, start date is either the date of presentation to you or established by collateral. It's not relying entirely on the patient's work. So he's had lots of counseling. It's been at least 6 months, this person says. He's been seeing a chaplain for 7 months. And then he's had a deployment in the past. Put him on Liv, and then 5 months later, comes back in. You know, he's been doing well for several months. And his symptoms have been essentially resolved with no medication for the last 2 months. So when he's returned to full duty, he's like, oh no, I can't go back to full duty because then I might go underway and do things. Oh no, I think I'm out on my die. So next month, he's still depressed because he's like, oh no, I have to go back to the ship. His spouse now is suddenly threatening to leave him. He threatens to kill himself if he returns to full duty. So he's admitted. and observed, saying, I'm gonna kill myself if I have to. But what do we have here?
Doing my due diligence, did anything happen on this ship? Dramatic, otherwise?
Yeah, you do all of the screeners for everything else and like nothing, you know, it's, deployments were like, great, you know. He's never said anything especially bad about like being underway, it's the fact that his wife's gonna leave him and that he kind of hates his job now. It was easier when someone was just telling him he has more responsibility now, and that drives him nuts.
This is a good example of why Mad Dog Maddox did not get married in a village a few months ago. Because it's, you know, it's a baggage. Move on.
We'll edit that out. Yeah, so let's say you rule everything else out, you know, now, is this an acute aggression disorder? Yes. That's what it sounds like. All right, so here's this again. You're back to step one. You've done another differential, you've asked about that, you ruled it all out. The start date is now the present. It was their presentation to you, basically, when you told them that they were coming off duty and they got all upset and you witnessed, you are the collateral decompensation. Okay, so it's been a couple months, adjustment disorder. So now the clock is ticking, right? You need to get them out on an acute adjustment disorder before it becomes chronic, if that's the plan. If the patient and you and the command are all like, yes, let's just let them leave. But you need to be calling and talking to the command about how they feel about that too. Or if you feel like this patient's going to be such a problem, like they might do something while on the ship, or you truly believe they're going to harm themselves, so they have to go back on the ship. You can tell them that I am recommending this Adsep. I'm sorry to disagree with you. So we're back here. You do the C&D module, and then you click enter C&D personnel. So this is a good step-by-step if you want to download the slides when you have to go do it. Just look for the slides that say step-by-step.
Can I add a step to that though? You have to actually call and enable C&D for yourself.
Say again?
You have to call and enable C&D for yourself.
You have to call in one?
You may not have the module.
Oh, okay.
If you don't see the module, they can add it.
Okay.
Like 5 seconds, yeah, they do it immediately.
Oh, yeah, and to do that, there's like, they have a good help page here with
Yeah.
phone numbers. So you call people. Yeah, 5 minutes, now you're here. All right, good. We call them up, we made sure we had access to the module, we have the module. I haven't done this yet, so thanks for helping. And you either search for the personnel if they're already in, or you may have to enter them in yourself. Same as in the LIMDO process. Okay, and then you enter an adjustment disorder with the dress removed. And then whatever else like you want to put there. This says other specified disorders of adult personality and behavior. All of a sudden, if you drop that thing that says personality on there, that flag also is going to happen. If you left that off, then they wouldn't. So that's something to be aware of. Do you just fill out everything going down? This doesn't look very long, good. You don't have to write a novel or anything. And then remember that when you have a brief clinical history here, it needs to be in LIMDO, command friendly. But in your note, it can be more fleshed out for the behavioral health providers that are going to be reviewing this and to see if they really believe you and approve with what you're doing. So, with a tiny little step, you'll have to go. Yes.
Hey Ryan, so if you enter that, do you incur any responsibility to follow up on it like you do like in the med board process, or like if you're in an inpatient setting, you're not going to see this patient as an outpatient, can you enter this or should you defer this to the outpatient provider?
If you entered this, you made the recommendation on inpatient. Is it now, can you pass off to the outpatient provider, like if they're continuing treatment?
Right, yeah, so like would I be getting like follow-up emails from this process?
If it's kicked back, you will.
Okay,
I mean, if they say no, or they say you need to change it, because it has to go through all of these steps. But you are responsible for what you write in there. So you would have to clarify any clarification needed to happen. When it gets to JAG, you're done. You said, if that testimony is on paper, you won't have to show up in a board itself. Does anyone have to ever?
So the only thing that I can think of is that if, so for example, Jake and I had a patient together where I put in the C and D and it was kicked back because somebody had put PTSD in the chart, that it was because I made the recommendation, it was then my job to write a memo that stated the reasons why I did not believe that this was due to PTSD and was due to a personality disorder. So that's how I could potentially see it coming back to the person. Like if you have to justify your reasoning for it, it would potentially come back to you as a person.
Or if there's anything unclear when you submit it. So as part of that, it's supposed to set a PDF for everything you put in. Sometimes that doesn't happen, right? So it got kicked back to me saying, none of this was filled out. I don't know what kind of was. Just do it.
Yeah, I talked with, some of you remember Captain Morgan, Daniel Morgan, an alum of this esteemed president. I was talking to him last night, he's in Korea, so I guess I was talking to him in the morning. But he had something, the adjustment disorder problem was kicked back, and he's had to clarify the whole adjustment disorder thing, right? So if you put it, especially if it's adjustment disorder, they will kick it back if there's other adjustment disorder in the chart and there's no clear timeline. Because people are going to review this, and you just had one that happened to him. That's Army, but Navy will do the same. They want to make sure it's right.
For those of us in the Army who don't do a lot of these, like any of the Navy colleagues that have been either at another site or like GFOs likely have a really good template where they did this, or talk to people who are at other Navy residencies, they do 7 of these a week, and they have like an adjustment disorder template, copy and paste it, it gets approved pretty much every time, so don't try to like come up with your own fancy language, you can talk to people for that.
If anyone has those and can put them in the notebook, that would be super.
We have templates of the 3822 for the Army. It's on my Sakai website. There was one of the slides had a link on it. I'll bet you get a lot of lingo on it.
And you can send those to me, but you're also perfectly capable of opening up, dropping the file and yourself. Yes, Tony.
To kind of piggyback off that though, I was working with Dr. Brown last month. She's an attending and trained at Portsmouth, and I think there's also an important kind of area factor that you need to count. Portsmouth, I think, is very Adsep heavy. Like they do it like this over there, and they're used to kind of running that like a machine. And she was finding that here that you can a lot more wall with that, and it's not as much this. And so I think you also have to kind of get a good gauge from people who already have their feet down where you are, so that you kind of have, you kind of know how to prepare those things. Those templates that work there might not work here. I personally had several kickback, and it's been a frustrating process.
So there's a culture everywhere you go, and you need to somehow figure out what that is. You'll figure it out when you put it in. They will let you know, but it'd be nice not to have to do extra work.
And you can always talk to your convening authority ahead of time too. Like if you're confused on how to put it or what word, ultimately they're going to tell you what you need to do so that they approve it, right? Like get them up at the beginning, so they.
Yeah. Yeah, because with convening authorities and all this, there is an arbitrary nature to a lot of what happens. You see that in the military a lot. Every commander interprets things differently. Every authority has their own interpretation of what the regulations tell them. And they have a broad leeway in a lot of cases, so it's good to get to know what their thoughts are. So you can still add somebody who has other non-wordable or other conditions, or even wordable conditions, as long as it's done correctly. But that's something we've already kind of talked about. This is just showing, it'll pop up on the screen, so it's probably not that helpful for you to see this, but you have to go through and answer all the questions. And then there's says additional recommendations. Here you have to, you're entering in kind of, C&D is like going and entering in a LMU. It results in restrictions for the duty limitations for the person, just like a LMU. Okay. If the personality disorder is not a reason for separation, so this is what I was told, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You can answer no, that this is not a personality disorder, not the reason for separation, even if they have one. I think this is pretty common, actually. People we write down personality traits a lot, and it results in like these chronic adjustment issues. But then they finally get up diagnosed with personality disorder, but you feel like the reason is not the personality disorder itself. You could do this, but that's really just the only change that happens here is the flag officer will have to review it. They can still be administratively separated for personality disorder. So if you think the personality disorder is the problem, say it. All right, more step by step. Okay. And so you have to choose an NED member number 2. So that's why I also talk to other people about decisions. This could be your supervisor as a resident. That's what I do when I put people on LibView or whatever. Or you just have to have somebody else say, oh, good job. Convening authority, then every MTF is different. That is right onto that. You'll have a summary that shows up, and it'll show you cases. So you can kind of go back in and see if you've got cases pending. And the summary here. So this is a clinical history, explanation of impairment and in the performance of the duties, and then all the other answers that you answered. It's just going to be summarized. You review it in its entirety. It's just more. Okay, you must sign it. This is another reason to call your convening authority and tell them you're putting stuff in, because you might forget to sign it. You think you put it in, and they call you up, 2 days later, and they're like, but you said you were going to put it in, and they're like, did you sign it? And they're like, I'll do that now. So make sure you sign it. Number 1. So here are some references. There's also this AMA chronic revenue disorder best practice guidelines too, if you want to read through that. And then Navy has a lot of good websites you can get into. These will be in the PowerPoint. Here, if you want to find them later, I can't remember them. But are there any Navy staff in here that want to give girls about Navy?
I would recommend just emailing Dr. Serpico anytime you're about to do this, because he has all the girls. He told me he did like 50 med boards in 3 years or something.
Oh, wow.
So he's the best person we have right now.
I think we kind of in some ways, I know I do, like underutilize this option for people. I work with, they spend tons of time trying to get better, not getting better, and the decision to try to separate them from the military, either with a med board or an administrative separation, has taken so long that it just becomes a med board anyway, because you have chronic adjustment disorder. And you could have, maybe prevented this before, if you had been thinking at the beginning, of the whole process, should I start discussing with this patient immediately whether or not they should really stay? And there's an end.
I'm obviously not Navy staff, but finishing up PDY 4 year, I think some of my toughest cases were like really ugly admin cases, and some lessons I really had to learn the hard way that I hope by me maybe speaking about it now I can help other people avoid similar situations. But I'll say that kind of my experience, at least in the NCR region, and kind of process these things is that With the Adsep, it's something that I was taught from intern year, that it's, faster process and saves the person of doing this called with med board process where they might be compensated and such. And, I've seen patients kind of go through that as well and don't wish that upon anyone. But I've also found that not everything's really cut and dry, and really the tough cases are the gray area ones where, hey, the diagnosis is adjustment disorder, but maybe they have this pre-existing depression that they never told about, and that we even submit a medical for something that's like pre-service and stuff. But for more of those little, I wouldn't call them red flags maybe, but little pink flags that come up bit by bit, and the more of them there are, it's better to just submit a med board, even if you don't think it'll go through, because then you get a whole board of physicians that basically write out and say, this is med board level, this is not med board level, and it's more power than your word. And even if it might start that 12-month sort of process, that what I've kind of learned is that me as the psychiatrist and the safe provider, that I have some power, but it's also limited, and there's so many other kind of levels, including OTSG, that things have to go through that I don't necessarily have control of. For example, I had a personality disorder kind of patient that had an MDD for a long time ago, where charged that they said resolve, and then she basically said, I look exactly like borderline personality, and said that to me word for word. I made the perfect documentation, put it through CND. They basically said in the CND, yes, everything you said looks right, but we're not going to put it in. So all those things kind of make it tough. It's frustrating. It's bad for me. It's bad for the patient. But all specific considerations that I think are important that don't always get discussed in the large framework of how this works.
Can I make a few comments? So why are we doing this? My hope is that your behavior is going to change. Right? You go from incompetent to competent. You go from lacking confidence to having confidence. So here's my ask. For 4s and 3s who have some of these, adapt the PGY2. To say, hey, I'm going to be doing this. You want to join me? I'm going to write this up. And just have them kind of experience this sort of by proxy through you so that they're there. Next time you're on call, PGY1 and 2, and there's nothing going on, we're going to significantly go down pretty soon here because Genesis. Just open this up and put the DOD ID in it, one of your patients, and just walk through it. Obviously, don't submit it, but just play around with it. This is a skill that you need to have. By the way, is this unique to this? Disability evaluation? No, I see this in my moonlighting gigs all the time. So one of the keys for me reflecting back is someone said every location you go to, depending on who is signing up, they have a different perspective. And so a good thing would be just setting up a meeting with them and say, hey, is there a specific thing you look for? Do you have a particular template you recommend? And I want to enable you because I'm transferring the liability to you as when there's a congressional investigation, they're going to say, Commander Serpico, why did you sign up on this thing? So you may have to design these systems where you go. You may be the one who have to educate the civilian providers in your EPA system, because they may not know. And so I think often we do the service to the Army, Navy, Marine Corps because we don't feel confident, so we don't even bother. Like, I don't really even want to talk about it. So one best practice is establish relationship with the second signature person for the Army, and then for the meeting authority for the Navy. Meet with them to say, okay, tell me what are the magic things you're looking for, and I bet you they have their own sort of ingredients they want in their soup. Okay, so that's one thing. Second, for collateral, I asked commanders for counseling forms, 15 sections, those are investigations, or any other legal stuff. They'll send it to you. It's amazing how much collateral you can get, especially for these misconduct type of commander evaluations that you do. Relationship with commanders is super important. We're trying to do this virtual EVA. My hope is that we're going to set up some virtual meetings with those commanders that you're gonna survey. So there's sort of a face-to-face time and there's this established relationship that you would have. Hopefully you'll do more of these. When you do go, especially in the Army, or the Navy at the division, higher level, you're gonna have psychologists, social workers, and you're gonna have to supervise them in doing this. So when I was in the division, I approved 240-something ABVs that I reviewed, but Adsep, 0. I made other people do them. But you gotta be able to guide them and walk them through all that. Remarkable when it's sweet. Hold on. All right. The other thing I always write in my thing when I submit it is I say the service member agrees with the recommendations and separation. It lowers the sphincter tone for whoever is reviewing it. Okay, so you are transferring liability. I always put that there so that, you know, is this a conflictual process or non-conflict? It shows. And the other thing is, don't do the same thing over and over again, right? So create templates. We're gonna have the extra thing in the Genesis. I have templates for emails that I use with commanders. If I see someone's service member, I just go in there and I just throw a lot of that stuff. A lot of it is like, you know, this kind of basic recommendations. But you're gonna have to get really good at organization, have your little folder ready for PUIs. We talked about this, and know exactly where these resources are. And you showed some resources that I didn't know by the psychologist, but it might be good to review those at some point. You know, just it's sort of like when you rent a car, you want to know where the headlights are. You know, who's trying to turn and the windshield wipers come on accidentally because it's new to you. It might be good for you to know where all the buttons are, so that you're not stressing over and staying here late. So my homework for the interns, who doesn't have access to Living Smart? Intern, raise them high, raise them proud. Okay, you got a month, get it. Who doesn't have e-profile access? Okay, a month, please get it. Okay, let the chiefs know when you have it. So that would be sort of a start. You can't play around with it. You can't do it. The final thing is for Met Board, remember Matt talked about duty limitations and impairments. For limitations, you gotta have documentation. So for the Army, please put people on profiles. If you're gonna recommend 3822 doesn't really count. So that's an official record, and you want to be able to show that this individual had, you know, restrictions when it comes to firearms and things like that. So when you're putting people for Med Board, that is another piece of, that's another thing that the ABD division will look at to see, you know, how many profiles someone's been on for this division. Thanks.
Dr. Min?
Yes.
Or whoever uploaded the information, the contact or e-profile access on the website, I think it's incorrect. I've reached out to them a handful of times and haven't gotten a response yet.
Oh, on the 7 website? campusite.org/7W.
Right.
It's outdated.
I believe so, unless the person just
I mean, it's also in the notebook, so there might be different, I don't know if the one in the notebook is updated, but if you find out what it's supposed to be, then that can be your responsibility.
Yeah, I just had Ms. King, create that. She didn't follow the same instructions. Maybe try again. But if it's outdated, if you find it, please update the website. Oh, one last thing. There's one Air Force, Emily. Where's Emily? Check out the website the Air Force has. There's some way of doing this. I have no idea. But it's easier. My first ABD was an Air Force patient, so it's a lot easier to do. Air Force didn't have better systems, in my experience, but But that piece is on there. And if I find any other resources, I'll let you inbox me. Thanks.
Is that submitted through ASINs?
I think so.
I don't know.
And don't bother to get ASIN unless I'm in it because it will expire in 9 days. I've had to ask for it twice. I'm good.
Thank you, Ryan. That was super entertaining.
Does anyone have the attendance?